and they have the right to transfer their child to another school in that district, and the school has to provide the transportation. So we do have competition among public schools.
Currently, charter schools are authorized in Tulsa and Oklahoma counties. What about in the rural areas? How does this work for small school districts that are isolated far away from the big city?
Well, you're obviously not going to have as many charters nor as many scholarship schools, but you will have some. And we were just on a fact-finding trip to Pennsylvania where we saw in even rather small communities, there would be schools that would crop up in those areas that would meet those needs that are high performing. The fact is, other area of choice, or one of the other areas, is this whole distance learning situation. You can make it so even in the smallest community that they provide the, math and science, the highest caliber, foreign languages, everything that you need in a larger school through a really robust distance learning program. Florida has done that. Jeb Bush, when he came down here, that was one of his emphasis, and that creates enormous choice in two different ways. One, there are some charters that go out and have kids throughout the state that are involved in a full-time distance learning program. There are other ones in which the local school district provides that distance learning to meet part of their curriculum, and it really depends on having the kind of really well-run, robust distance learning situation. And there's movement in the legislature to create that in Oklahoma.
Stephen Crawford, you mentioned that administrators would probably be willing to accept an expansion of charter schools. Indeed, a lot of people are saying that does need to happen to some extent. For any of you, for all of you, what do you see the picture looking like in Oklahoma in the next few years in terms of the development of charter schools?
Well, I'll just stab at that a little, but we think there is some effort and will be effort to expand charter and choice schools through virtual and even tax credit schools, schools where parents take the taxes before they pay them. But the point that we would say is it needs to be done where the accountability is there. It needs to be done where there is some oversight. We have accepted the fact that maybe virtual is here to stay and should be. They tell me, research tells me that a blended program where you have kids in the regular classroom and 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day they take a virtual course. It works very well and is good as a good setup for schools. And we have a lot of that going on. One of our problems is we have no funding stream for technology in the public school setting. If we have technology, robust technology, we're having to either do that through a bond issue referendum or we're having to take funding away from something else to have that kind of a information age type technology in our schools. We need to look at how we are going to fund the technology, the infrastructure, and the ability to have high quality, robust, interactive connectivity for children to learn online because it doesn't always exist.
Linda, how do teachers feel about online education?
I think they're open to the concept just as they'd be open to anything because we're in the age of technology, we're in the age of change, and they're open to change. One of our concerns is that we want to look out for all children, not just children from supportive homes. We want to see that all children have an opportunity. And sometimes technology could be the way to that, but as Stephen said, funding can be an issue, so there are a lot of things to look at. But I think we're very open to looking at it.
Is accountability an issue there?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you get around that?
Well, you get around that by having them subject to the same testing. And that's the way scholarship schools go. You want also to have this transparent. You don't want just the NAEP test, let's say, for reading to be buried somewhere. You want it publicized so parents and consumers of education know what kind of production we're talking about. So that's part of the way you have that kind of accountability. I agree with everybody seems to agree that technology is good. I don't think it's a problem of funding. You look at the United States, and we have the highest percentage of monies spent on administration and education of any country in the world. We also, in Oklahoma, the studies have shown, we're either the worst or one of the worst in terms of the amount of money spent on administration and education of any state in the country. So we tend to be one of the worst in terms of doing it. What we want to do is we want to have, in addition to report cards for each school on their progress in education, have an administrative cost report card too, in which the public can judge whether, they're spending majority of their funds on the classroom and on the teacher and increasing salaries, or are they spending too much money on administration that can be saved through all kinds of programs.
Stephen, administrative costs, are they out of line?
Well, I think Bill's, I don't know where he gets his information. I looked at the NCES National Statistics for Educational Services data just yesterday, and we rank 46th in the nation on what we spend in administration of schools, according to their data, their latest data. So I don't think we rank higher than states around us. We are below average in the surrounding states in what we spend on administration, but we're also below average in what we spend on teachers. And one of our problems is we don't invest. We're 48th, 49th in the nation on what we spend on public education. We're not heavily invested in public education in the state. And I understand. I'm an Oklahoman. I grew up here. I intend to live my whole life in Oklahoma. I'll be an Oklahoman when I leave here. But the point is that at 48th in the nation in spending on education, your administration is looking at it from a percentage point of view is a very skewed perspective. If you look at regional average and what we spend per child, we are below the regional average, and we are 46th in the nation according to the National Center for Educational Statistics.
There's been another bill filed in the legislature this year that would require at least 65% of the monies to go to the classroom. First of all, how much is going to the classroom? And secondly, how would you implement that kind of a plan to get more money into the classroom? What does that really mean?
I think that's where you get into semantics and definitions, because how the money is going into the classroom. Of course we want more money in the classroom, but you have to work out the details, such as, does that include libraries? Does that include counselors? Does that just include the classroom? So we're all for more money in the classroom, but we have to look at the details.
What we need to do is be able to compare schools and school districts and be able to look at the ones that are doing more and have, you're right, you have to come up with a definition. You have to have it so you can't have game playing on those numbers. And you have to come up with a percentage based on those criteria of what you think ought to be spent in the classroom. Then you can encourage those school districts that are getting an F in terms of the amount of money being spent on administration to improve. You can get that information to the school boards. You can tend to improve that. We are still, and the percentage spent is important because we have not only low wages in Oklahoma, we have a low standard of living, we have low per capita income. All those factors make us tend to be lower. If you factored those back in, and it'd be more in the middle in terms of our educational funding. And all the reports are showing the funding isn't the critical thing. It is how the school district is structured.
Very quickly, Stephen, if you could tell me what is a tax credit scholarship. That has been mentioned here today.
Well, I think there's legislation to look at tax credit scholarships, and from our perspective, it is a mechanism whereby funds could be set aside prior to paying your taxes that could be used by some control group for educational scholarships for children to go somewhere besides a public school. I believe that's kind of the mechanism they're looking at. I can't tell you for sure. I haven't really studied that language well enough to know for sure, but that's what they typically mean. We
have just 30 seconds, so quick answer. Where do you think education reform is going to go in this upcoming legislative session? Any guesses?
I think you're going to have much greater choice. I think you're going to have much more freedom for superintendents to be able to hire and fire teachers and to do those things that can make those school districts really superb. You are going to see a whole bunch of different reforms, more than we've ever seen in our lifetime.
Linda Hampton?
I think we all define reform differently, but we all want the same thing. So what we have to do is work to get the same thing for the betterment of public education.
We're going to let that be the last word here today. Bill Price, thank you for joining us. Linda Hampton
Thank you.
and Stephen Crawford, good to have you here.